Now on Open Book is Cenk Uygur. He is the host and founder and CEO of the Young Turks. He's written a soon-to-be bestseller, Justice is Coming. I love the title. Also love the lightning bolt. How progressives are going to take over the country, and America is going to love it. I have to tell you, as a conservative, when I read the title, I got scared. I could feel my sphincter tightening up. Okay, as oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. Then I read the book, Cenk, and I'm like, okay, I agree with so much in this book. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about like, oh, people say, oh, now you're a rhino or something like that. No, I'm for, which I believe you're for, an aspirational economy where we give people the tools necessary to go forward, okay, and see if they can make something of themselves, okay, as opposed to letting them fall through the net, if you will, and smash themselves. Fair enough or no?
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. And I look, I appreciate you being super open-minded about it. But you're not alone. A lot of conservatives who are reading it are saying, "Wait a minute, I kind of largely agree with a lot of these things," and it's partly because there's a difference between the Republican Party and just Republican voters, right? Which I partly explained in the book, and so the Republican Party often misrepresents what Republican voters actually want. And secondly, there's huge misconceptions about progressives and what progressives want. And so when you get rid of like a lot of the lies in the media and among the political parties, you wind up realizing, oh my God, we actually agree on a lot of things.
Yeah, and our journeys, I don't think are that dissimilar. But I want you to tell our viewers and listeners about your journey, dovetail it into the young Turks. Talk to us about the Justice Democrats.
Yeah. So I actually started out as a Republican when I was a kid. I came to the country when I was 8 years old, and I grew up in a suburb of New York in central Jersey, and my dad ran a small business. And by the way, we were chased out of Turkey by communists, and um, so we started out as Republicans, logically so, right? And the media back then has made Ronald Reagan look like a demigod. So I thought, obviously, you go with Reagan, right? But I was a liberal Republican. I was liberal on social issues and conservative on economic issues. And so eventually, the Republican Party left me. I mean, there's no liberal Republicans left, obviously. I think semi-obviously, there's a couple hanging around, right? But and when Bush started the Iraq War, I'm like, I'm all the way out. I don't want any piece of this. Okay. And then I came to realize over the years that progressives actually had the right answer. So who are progressives? People like FDR, JFK, LBJ. By the way, Teddy Roosevelt, too. So there's Republicans and Democrats who've been progressives. Mm-hmm. It just means that you're sticking up for the average guy and not for the elites. And so, like, for example, FDR was vicious in fighting against the powerful elites. These days, they lie to you, the mainstream media does, and tells you, oh, no, Democrats are supposed to be soft and weak and just float away like a goddamn cloud, right? No, FDR and LBJ kicked the living crap out of their opponents, and that's how you're supposed to be. You're supposed to fight for the people.
Rightly or wrongly, let me just test this theory on you. We're only as good as the lower part of our economic strata, and I think Teddy Roosevelt understood that. Believe it or not, Henry Ford understood that. There's a very famous story about Jacob Riis, the Dutch journalist in the early 1900s, showing Teddy Roosevelt, who was an aristocrat, the squalor in East New York and the housing tenements that were actually collapsing on each other on the immigrants. And he really pushed for building code safety in New York as a public servant. And then he said, hey, if we don't protect these people, he told the robber barons as president, they're going to come at your house with like tiki torches and shotguns if you don't give them good living standards. Henry Ford went back and said, no problem. I'm going to pay them enough to afford the car that they're producing and put them in a single family house and a good public school system and so forth. Why have we lost that? Is it, we could call it noblesse oblige, or we could call what Roosevelt, they could call Roosevelt a traitor to his class. He's like, dummies, I'm trying to save capitalism. I'm trying to save the democratic system from your greed. Go ahead. What do you say to that?
No, Anthony, you nailed it right there at the end there. So there's a couple of factors, but the overwhelming number one factor is greed, and it's run amok. And so what, as I explained in chapter 4 of the book, we lost democracy because Chamber of Commerce came up with an idea to basically capture the Supreme Court, put activist judges on it, and in the long run, allow for legalized bribery. And when you allow for legalized bribery, corporations will buy all the politicians and will live under corporate rule. And in fact, other justices like Byron White warned of that. They said this is a mortal danger to our democracy. You guys aren't getting it. They're going to buy all the politicians. And that's exactly what happened. So, and why did that happen? Because of infinite greed. They cannot stop their greed. So Sheldon Adelson gave Trump $100 million twice, right? Through super PACs, etc., both in 16 and 20. Why? Because he wanted all of these things in return, right? He wanted to crush unions. He wanted to make sure that he paid low wages to his workers, but he paid lower taxes, especially the repatriation tax, because Adelson actually made most of his money in China. Like, see, nobody knows that the biggest political benefactor of Donald Trump made most of his money in China, right? But he was allowed to buy Donald Trump. And if you think you can't buy Donald Trump for $100 million, you don't know Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, okay. Of course. You can buy a congressman for like, $5,000 donations. I mean,
yeah, 100%. And then one other thing that happened, Anthony, is then corporations got super smart and they figured out, hey, we need good cop, bad cop, both in politics and in media. And as I write in the book, the good cop is if you're so inclined, the way that mainstream media paints it, Democrats are the good cops, Republicans are the bad cops, MSNBC is the good cops, and Fox News is the bad cops. But in reality, they're all on the same team. And that's why we live under corporate rule. But Anthony, most importantly, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, conservative, or liberal, you have got the correct answer is balance. We have to have a society, a government, and an economy that is balanced. If you get out of whack, you get out of balance, then you go back to exactly what you were describing. People grabbing pitchforks. And by the way, so they say riots are the voice of the unheard, right? There's a famous Martin Luther King comment. But in 2020, we had riots on the left side, right? Because of George Floyd, etc. And then we had riots from the right-wing side on January 6th in 2021, right? So both are the voices of the unheard. I know no other person on the left will ever say that about January 6th, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is both sides are super frustrated and ready to grab their pitchforks and do serious damage because no one in power will listen to them.
It's interesting. Corey Lewandowski and I used to go to Bernie Sanders rallies. We found that the same people that were going to Donald Trump rallies were going to Bernie Sanders rallies. So this is a grievance. There's a group of people that were once economically aspirational in the country, Cenk, that now feel economically desperational. I want to test something else on you and then get into more specifics of the book. I think Citizens United is the Plessy versus Ferguson of our time. And I just want to explain that to everybody quickly. What was Plessy versus Ferguson? The court ruled you could have separate but equal systems for black and white people. It led to widespread segregation, and it led to a calamity for the African Americans in terms of the ability to integrate into the economy, into the culture. 80 years later, Brown versus Board of Education repealed that, and we started integrating the schools. Plessy and Citizens are identical to me. We've created a separate but equal democracy. So someone like Sheldon Adelson, no problem. Here's $100 billion under the auspices, or $100 million under the auspices of free speech. But he's now got more power in the democracy than his one vote. And I guess what I'm asking you, do you believe that? Because since Citizens United, if you look at corporate welfare and you look at crony capitalism, it is absolutely through the roof. The politicians are bought and paid for. Big food is putting dog shit into our food. Big pharma is allowed to lie about all kinds of stuff because they're lighting up the Congress. Am I wrong about this or right about this?
Generally right. So, look, Plessy v. Ferguson was one of the worst decisions of Supreme Court history, obviously, and that's why you're referencing it.
No question.
And I just want to give the caveat, of course, that the suffering of black people in this country is unparalleled, right? So now and as much as we suffer under corporate rule, we're not in chains and they don't take our kids away and sell them, right? Now, having said that, you're not wrong that it created a two-tier system, and one tier, which is a tiny, tiny tier, the top, not even 1%, it's really the top 0.1%. They give the most political donations and get the most favors. Those guys rule us all. They have primaries before we have primaries, and they give us our options. And they say, here's the two senators you can choose from. Yes, I paid both of them. Ha ha. Go ahead and have your democracy, right? And the rest of us, look, there's a super depressing study in the middle of the book. I mean, I give tons of hope at the end, right? Because I think we can turn it around. But in the middle of the book, this study of Princeton and Northwestern, they studied about 20 years of policy, and they concluded that the bottom 90% of Americans have literally zero effect on American government policy. Well, that's not a democracy. That's a two-tier system where we're all basically working as chattel for corporations. And Byron White warned about this too. He said corporations are something that we created, and the government need not permit its own creation to consume it, is what he said. And that's what happened. Corporations consumed us. And by the way, this isn't capitalism. This is corporatism. And corporatism destroys capitalism. It hates free markets. It loves monopolies. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
And it creates cronyism, and a result of which it reduces the competition. To start my firm Skybridge today, it would nearly be impossible, Cenk. The first 9 employees would have to be lawyers and compliance people, and so they've killed the ability to create the competition, and the banks know that. The larger companies and I know that. Okay. And it's just a disaster. Let's go into the book.
Can I tell you something quick about that?
Yeah.
So I was talking to another progressive friend who's also a successful businessman, and he cares an enormous about the climate and about getting things right, etc. And he said, what's interesting is that regulations, of course, we think on the left are necessary to make sure we don't have monopolies, make sure you don't have dog crap in your food and all that stuff. But sometimes overregulation can be done by giant corporations to help them kill off their competition.
No question. They like it. The banks snicker at the regulation. They'll go on television and say, oh, we're for deregulation, and they're laughing. Put more regulation on the burner, You said something.
So the answer is balance. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, exactly. You said something in the book I read. I was like, you're so right about this, but I want you to explain why. Okay, I'm going to give you the exact quote. Elections are decided by donors far more than they are by voters. So tell us why.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a poll that shows that 93% of Americans agree with that. The only reason why we don't all think about that 24/7 is because corporate media, which is as I explained in the book, both mainstream media and right-wing media like Fox News, they never, ever talk about it because all the money from the corruption goes straight into their pockets. The politicians raise, like last midterm election, $17 billion, and they spend it all on media. They buy ads with it. So the media has 17 billion reasons to not tell you about the obvious corruption. But as I explained, the American people caught on anyway. And that's why the establishment and mainstream media, et cetera, have lost all credibility. So the donors decide elections. Well, as I explain in the book, in the House, I give examples. Recent elections, 97% of the people who had more money won. So it didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. It didn't matter if they had experience or no experience. The only thing that mattered was how much money they had. After Justice Democrats, which I co-founded, they run without corporate PAC money. So we brought that number down to 87% for an election, right? But now it's rising back up again. And so if there was honest media coverage about politics, all they would talk about is the donors, because the donors control the politicians nearly 100%. Yeah. The rest of it is all fake debates, fake theater.
Like you said, there's too many vested interests, so that's not going to happen, And so let me fire this at you. I want to get your reaction to it. Okay, I think the GI Bill was one of the most progressive things that we have done in our country's history. We took Jews and Italians and Turks and Irish that were growing up in the Bowery or lower middle class. They came out of the military. They could go to school. They became doctors and lawyers and accountants, and they all were in traditional blue collar working class families, became white collar, and literally transformed America. One, do you agree with that? And then secondarily, what are some programs that we could do today that would have that type of GI Bill effect on the society?
Yeah. So I have first of all, yes, I totally agree. Second of all, I have a proposal that I talk about on the show every once in a while. It's not in the book, but I think that after high school, everybody should be forced to do 1 year of service. And so you could either choose the military, you could choose the Peace Corps, or you could choose something like AmeriCorps where you serve inside the country as a teacher or a volunteer of some sort, right? And the reason for that is I'm not very pro-military at all, right? Like I'm in favor of the military that defends us. I'm not in favor of a Pentagon that enriches itself and engages in offensive wars. So I'm not trying to drive people to that kind of mission. No, the reason that I'm in favor of it is because we've got to bring the country together. We have lost track of each other, and we have lost our bonds. What happened in the wars, the one silver lining was we brought black people and white people together. We brought kids from the Bronx and West Virginia and California and Kansas that didn't know each other, didn't share the same culture together. And they became brothers and sisters, and they fought together, and they bonded, and they became a country, and they became one culture. Now that culture is frayed, and we're now in our own bubbles. We've got to bring people back together so that we can have a shared bond and a shared goal.
Well, there's no question. And just to buttress that, George McGovern, who was a Democrat from the Dakotas, he loved Bob Dole. And he said, we served in the Army together, and we may have been different ideologies, may have different philosophies. Okay. But of course, McGovern went on to write that very famous Wall Street Journal editorial. He had started a bed and breakfast in Connecticut, and it failed. And he blamed some of it on the burdensome regulation. And he said, geez, if I had known how hard it was to be an entrepreneur, I probably wouldn't have put through all that burdensome regulation when I was in the Congress. And so what we're finding, Cenk, and this is the thing I really respect about you, is that we have a lot more in common. When I came out of the Trump administration and I finally turned on Mr. Trump and had to explain why I could no longer support him, you invited me on the show. I don't know if you remember this whole conversation, and obviously you had some, harsh opinions of him, and we talked about my evolution. I got it totally wrong. I thought Trump could have been a transformative politician and broke this sort of party fever, if you will, and just started really just focused on trying to do the right thing for America, and then doing something that FDR did is he went over the top of everybody, went right to the people, explained to them what the hell he wanted to do. And then they wrote to their congressmen and senators and said, hey, we're going with this guy, so get out of the way. Is there a politician in our lifetimes that can do that? And then the next question is, when are you running for president?
Soon. So let me tackle it one by one. So first off, I get that idea that Trump was going to be a non-regular politician and that he could have been transformative. Now, I didn't buy into it from day one because I always thought that Trump was a con man, and Trump University, Trump Charity. It's just one con after another. And so he's been doing this his whole life. So I thought, oh no, they're going the wrong direction, right? And so the idea is right. And that's why when people read the book, yeah, I'm super tough on Republicans in different parts, but I'm also super fair to conservative voters. I explain where no one on the left or the mainstream media explains, which is that the conservative voters had the right instinct. The politicians are full of crap. The media is full of crap. Corruption is rampant, and they hate corruption, and I love them for it. But they just got misdirected towards Trump. And so they were dying for an option that was not the establishment. And when Trump stuck his middle finger, tiny little middle finger, out at the establishment, the crowd went nuts, right? But then Trump being Trump, instead of directing that back towards the people and trying to help others, like Teddy Roosevelt did, like Franklin Roosevelt did, no, he absorbed it all for himself because that's in his nature. And so, and it's me. He's unbelievably selfish, right? I can't believe that you guys, like the right wing, can't see it. It's maddening. On the other hand, look at what people don't want to see, like what they won't acknowledge when they don't want to see it. Joe Biden is now 13 points lower than when he barely beat Trump in the Electoral College. And every Democrat's going, I don't see it. I don't see it. The Democratic leaders, none of them are running against them. Everyone in the media until very recently was like, nobody better run against Joe Biden. Joe Biden is he's the only one that can beat Trump. Like, he's the only one that could. Oh, first of all, are you saying that there's no Democrat in the country that could beat Donald Trump, who always has like an unfavorability of minimum 55%? That is damning of the Democratic Party. I don't believe that. And I think anybody who believes that is nuts. I think the only person who could lose to Trump is Joe Biden. So he beat him by 4.5 points last time and barely won the Electoral College. And now he's losing by a point or two. And he doesn't have the charisma to turn it around. Democratic Party, wake up. So the correct answer, of course, would have been Bernie 2016. Okay. And so 2020, he got into the cultural stuff a little bit more than he should have, et cetera. Economic populism that he had in 2016 was nearly perfect. But
yeah,
Bernie's
they weren't going to give it to him, though. You know that.
No way.
Because he wasn't really a Democrat for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. He's actually the traditional Democrat. He's much more closer to FDR, JFK, et cetera. These new guys are corporate stooges, but that's why they weren't going to give it to Bernie. The media hated Bernie Sanders because he's not in favor of corporate rule. And by the way, that's also why they hate Donald Trump. So since we're in this dire straits, where nobody's got any good options, and both the media and politicians stuff these two terrible options down your throats. So then I got so frustrated, Anthony, and I asked tons of people to run. I asked like half a dozen strong progressives to run. They didn't want to do it. Then I got to the point where I'm like pleading with Democratic governors. Jesus, any of you can beat Biden or Trump, right? Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania beat a Trump clone by like 15 points. Andy Beshear is a Democratic governor of Kentucky. Pritzker's got $1 billion and a popular governor of Illinois. We can go on and on. And so I beseech them. And it didn't work because they love obedience. The Democratic Party has become like the party of authoritarian rule. If the dear leader says it, you must bow your head. That is not what the Democratic Party is supposed to be about. So I got so frustrated. I was like, all right, God damn it, then I'm going to consider going in. And so right now I'm talking to staff, I'm talking to lawyers, I'm talking to clients, I'm getting ready. And so is it 100%? No. But am I leaning in that direction? Yes. Am I getting ready to do it? Yes. Is it an act of desperation? Yes. Like, do I think Cenk Uygur, a name that, 5% of the country might love, but a huge percentage of the country hasn't heard and can't even pronounce, and that I got a great chance of winning this thing? I don't know, but I do know this. I want to give the people an option of not Biden, not Trump, and someone who's honest. And everybody knows this about me, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. I'm going to fight for you. I'm a goddamn fighter. I don't sit around and go, oh, golly gee, there was nothing I could do. No, I fight like hell, and I don't do it for me. I do it for you. And that's a giant, giant difference. And I've proved it 100 times. And every time I get pilloried by the press and everybody else, and I come back for more because somebody's got to do it.
2024? Or when do you want to do this? Like right now?
Yeah. I'm not playing.
Okay.
Like, Biden, look, I think Biden has a 90% chance of losing. I think we're whistling past the graveyard. And
but again, I love it. And you're probably going to end up getting my vote because it's such a disaster out there. And I actually think you're a sensible guy and you have enough emotional security and intelligence to bring in smart people around you. So, but how do you break through the demo publicans, okay, which is this sort of uniparty duopoly at the top? He's the sitting you're going to run as a Democrat, I'm assuming, right? You're running as a, so So
Democrat.
give me the game plan. How do you do it?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm under no delusion that it's going to be easy. Like I'm going to come in and they're like, oh, Cenk Uygur is finally in the race. Let's all rally around him. It's not going to happen, right? In terms of the Democratic Party, they're going to throw every kind of, character assassination you can imagine after me.
I've been there, man.
Yeah. And so, but is there a pathway? Yeah, there's a pathway for a couple of reasons, Anthony, because we're in a unique situation. 72% of Democratic voters don't think Joe Biden's even going to make it through a second term. So they keep screaming, give us another option. And the Democratic monopoly says, no, we won't. Well, okay, sad day for you. Then I'm going to give them another option. Now, is it possible? I mean, is it like super likely? No, I get that it's very, very hard. But at the same time, is it possible that you could catch lightning in a bottle when 72% of Democrats say, give us another option? Yeah. And here, let me play out a scenario for you, Anthony, that is not at all crazy. So our kid Jr. nearly got to 20 points, and now he's out of the Democratic primary, and he's going to run as an independent, right? Mm-hmm. That's because people are desperate for a second option. If I come in guns blazing, proverbially, politically, rhetorically, right, and I get to 20 points, you're telling me the establishment isn't going to panic? I mean, if I get to 25, there's going to be a 5-alarm fire in D.C., and you know that. And then what's going to happen next? Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Pritzker, et cetera, they're all going to jump in, right? Because they're not going to let me win. And they know that Biden is a wounded antelope. And so if I start catching that wounded antelope, then all of a sudden we're going to have a real Democratic primary. And that's what I'm after.
All right. So you're flying up to New Hampshire. You're going to Iowa. What's the game plan?
So honestly, the game plan is mainly media. So when you have bare bones budget, and by the way, we'll see. Look, my audience and everybody else that cares about this stuff is going to tell us whether they're into it or they're not into it. Because I don't I'm a relatively successful businessman, but I run a small business, right? So I don't have billions of dollars sitting around. I don't have tens of millions of dollars sitting around. Right. I don't have any of that kind of money sitting around. Right. So either it's going to get funded by the people and they're going to say, yeah, go get them, Tiger, right? Or it's not. And if it fizzles out because we don't get the funding, then it is what it is. But just give me a couple $1 million and I'm in this thing. And I got it. And because people misunderstand this, there's a lot of BS about politics. Oh, Rick Santorum nearly won Iowa in one of these years because he went and met a lot of people in diners. No, I love the diners. I love meeting people, but that's not how you win. It's not even close. So, look, I gained painful, valuable experience when I ran for Congress. And I tried the door knocking. I tried the canvassing. I tried every kind of thing that you could imagine. In fact, I raised a lot of money. I even had more ads than my opponents. Okay. None of it works. The only thing that works is media. And so you've got to get into media and you've got to reach people. And then you've got to show them that, yes, there's finally an alternative. If you catch that lightning in a bottle, that thing goes 100 miles an hour.
All right. Well, I wish you great success. We're at the point in the podcast where I have 5 words I read to my authors, and then you can respond. You can give me a 1 word, a sentence. You can let loose, whatever you want to do. Let's go to the first word. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Republican.
Misdirected.
All right. Democrat.
Misdirected.
Misdirected parties. Okay, we're in trouble. We both agree to that. Justice.
Love it. Can't get enough of it. I think it's coming, and I hope that it gets here soon.
Some arbitrariness to it, though, which worries me, to be honest. When I think about the word justice, when I'm reading your book, the rich get better justice in this country. They do. This is why I'm against the death penalty, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the book, which is that it's supposed to be justice for all. Right. That's in our founding documents. And we all got to fight for justice for all. Otherwise, we're never going to get it.
Exactly. And remember that you're slaves to the law in order to be free. And if we're all subordinate to it, we can have a very powerful country. But under totalitarianism, you end up with cronyism. And we're sort of getting a blended type of cronyism right now, which we have to figure out a way to stop. Progressive.
The true heart of the country. People want to move forward. They want positive change in the world. Mm-hmm. And these are the ideals that the country was built around.
You need to see their neighbors do better. Ultimately, you feel better about yourself when everyone's doing better. America.
Love it. Can't get enough of it. and I want to bring back democracy and the idea of America that we all grew up loving.
All right. Well, you wrote a phenomenal book. The title of the book is Justice is Coming: How Progressives Are Going to Take Over the Country and America is Going to Love It. I would encourage everybody, whatever their ideological persuasion is, to please read the book, because I found it fascinating. And I agree with a lot of that book, Cenk. And so I thank you for writing it. I could look forward to following you on the campaign trail. Send me a link to make a donation. This way I can get everybody upset with me. I like getting people upset with me. So send me a link. All right, brother?
All right, that sounds good. We don't have it yet, but I will. But I will give you the link for the book. tyt.com/justice. That's the link for the book. And so, but Anthony, in all seriousness, if I make that decision and we're going forward, I will definitely send you the link, and I appreciate you, brother.
All right. You got it, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Life is a use it or lose it proposition. Young people don't see the end of times, but older people really, by the time you're 40 or 50, I think it weighs on you. And so my argument is you're going to end up working 80,000 hours in your life. Why not do what you love? And I fear that our society has been steering people towards, quote, safe jobs, which in a day of AI may not even be that safe anymore. And I would argue the safest thing you could possibly do is find a career in something that you're totally fascinated with. And the reason is all the techniques that tell you how to be the most successful thing you can possibly be, they're all 10 times easier if you're fascinated and in love with the subject matter. Everything gets easier and you get energy rather than it costing you.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining us today is Bill Gurley. The book is phenomenal. Running Down a Dream: How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love. Don't all of us want to do that? But Bill, I've been following your career from a distance. It's a real pleasure for me to have you on our
Thanks for having me
podcast
on.
together. And I'm a big book lover, and this is going to be on my recommended list going forward for young and old
appreciate that.
people. There's so much in the book. I wanna go to uh, uh, something that I love, which is getting a book published. So let's start right there. How does it feel to have this published now?
It's a bit overwhelming. This was a passion project on the side for me, not my day job. And it was born out of a presentation I gave 8 years ago at the University of Texas. And once it began to take life as a book, for reasons that we could dive into, I took it very seriously and did a ton of academic research, talked to a ton of experts. I really wanted it to be great. And so it took about 5 years, literally, not full time, like in the background, to get it birthed. And then the thing I had no idea, promoting the book is quite tedious.
Yeah, it's hard. Now listen, I've done a couple of books. It's hard. You gotta get out there. You gotta get your personality out there. But you're doing a hell of a job. You know, I've seen you on a couple of different podcasts. I've listened to you. I think the story about James Clear observing you when you were at the University of Texas at the McCombs.
Yeah, he found the
School of
video
Business.
on the YouTube and reposted it, which gave me some confidence. You know,
Yeah.
he's perhaps the best-selling author in the self-help categories. Well, him and Mel
Yeah.
Robbins.
Well,
So,
listen, he's written a phenomenal book about habits, but you have recognized something through pattern recognition. But there's also something else that you're doing, which is evident in your book. You have a tremendous amount of self-awareness, which is, if you don't mind me saying this, because I've worked on Wall Street for 40 years, venture capitalists and Wall Streeters typically don't have a lot of self-awareness, Bill Gurley, okay? So this is something that you have, which I give you an enormous amount of credit for. So tell us about your insights from your own self, and tell us how you saw these patterns. And that's why this is why the book is so good, by the way. So tell us about that.
yeah, so there was a period in my life, I'm a big book fan as well, where I was reading a ton of biographies, and I finished this third biography and saw a through line between it and two others in completely different fields. And these were all people that started on the very bottom rung of the ladder, but had high intent. So they wanted to be successful in the category, starting at the very bottom. And I noticed that they all did very similar things. And some of these things are things that aren't generally recommended to young people. I think we also live in a world, at least in North America, where our path to and through college has gotten super intense. and kids are just way overscheduled, and they don't really have the opportunity. And others have written about this. Haidt's written about this. Rick Rubin's talked about. They're so overscheduled that they just don't have the time to find what they love and to really fall in love with something that they can turn into a career. And so, the, it, I wrote this book with just one objective in mind, which is to help unlock human potential. I want people to believe they can go do something that maybe their parents or some advisor told them not to, and have the motivation and the methods to go do it.
You know, you're an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur in my career, and so I've gotten some things right, Bill. I've gotten some things very wrong. I've had career setbacks. I infamously went into politics for a little while, got my ass fired after 11 days. So I've had my bumps and scrapes along the way. But there's something that you write about in this book that I want you to address, because I do believe this, and this is something that you cite Daniel Pink's research in this
Yeah.
about the regrets of inaction. So that's
Yeah.
me. I feel like whatever's happened has happened. I'm willing to accept it, primarily because I've been on the playing field throwing interceptions and a few touchdowns. So talk about the regrets of inaction, as you beautifully
Yeah,
write
and
about in
and
the
and
book.
you mentioned earlier, career regret. We did a survey first on SurveyMonkey, and then we did it again with Wharton People Analytics because we wanted to make sure we got it right. Where we asked people that had been to college, if you could start your career over again, would you do it differently? And in our original SurveyMonkey, 7 out of 10 said yes. With Wharton, it was 6 out of 10. It's still a vast majority of people. Daniel Pink, in his book, The Power of Regrets, notes that humans dwell on regrets of inaction. He calls them boldness regrets. These are things you didn't try.
Right.
And the older you get, the more they weigh on you. Humans are fabulous at forgiving themselves for mistakes, kind of what you just walked through. Those are action mistakes. We're like, oh, that's all right. Water under the bridge. I learned something, and you move on. But the thing you never tried is the thing that eats at you as you get old.
So young people listen to this podcast, and thank God for that. So I want you to grab the young men and women that listen to this, grab them by their shirt, grab them by the collar, and shake them a little right now, and give me the message, Bill.
Yeah. So first of all, we have a phrase in the book: "Life is a use it or lose it proposition," and I think young people don't see the end of times. Like, it seems very far away, but older people really, it weighs. By the time you're 40 or 50, I think it weighs on you. And so, my argument is you're going to end up working 80,000 hours in your life, and why not do what you love? And I fear that our society has been steering people towards, quote, safe jobs, which in a day of AI may not even be that safe anymore. And I would argue the safest thing you can possibly do is find a career in something that you're totally fascinated with. And the reason is all the techniques in the book that tell you how to be the most successful thing you can possibly be, they're all 10 times easier if you're fascinated and in love with the subject matter. Like, everything gets easier, and you get energy rather than it costing you energy. So I would also tell them one last thing. I would just tell them, if you don't know what that is, that's completely fine. Don't stress out about it. Just keep trying things. Take shots on goal. See what really interests you until you find it. And the whole chapter in our book called Chase Your Curiosity is about that journey. So it doesn't presume you know this going in.
I mean, this is fascinating. The reason why I was going to step in is related to something that you write about, which is the ethos of the reality of most people can't afford to be wrong. And again, it's something to do with their self-image, but it could also be an economic reason. Somebody like
Yeah.
me at the early part of my career, I didn't have the guts to start my own business. In fact, I wrote down the day I graduated from law school, Bill, I said, I'm going to have my own business, but not until I pay off all this school debt. It took me
Yeah.
7 years, and I worked at Goldman Sachs for 7 years. When the debt was paid off, I left and
Then you
started
could
my own
do it.
business.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was scary even then without that financial rock or that boulder on my shoulder. So how do you get through that?
I
Tell
think
us
it's
about
difficult.
that.
I would tell you that so the for your listeners, the book's divided into profiles and principles, and they interleave and alternate. And the profiles are stories, and a couple of the stories people have $0 when they start. Certainly,
Right.
the Bob Dylan's one of the stories when he went to New York, he had $10.
No, it's a great the Dylan story, which even though I saw the movie, I didn't really see in your context. We'll
Yeah,
get to
they
that in a
missed
second.
this part. Most of
Yeah,
our
yeah,
coverage is pre the movie.
yeah.
And
I
then
love the Dylan story. I wanna get to the Dylan story, but weave it in with
yeah, but
this
Jen Atkins, I
fear
was
of
gonna say
failure.
Jen Atkins went to New York or LA with $200. Now your situation's worse because that is negative money, which is more of a handcuff. Um, and I would tell people one thing they can do, and AI can be super helpful on this, is you can plan and imagine without actually doing something. So, and I think the more you do of that as an exercise, the more confidence you will build that you could possibly go in that direction. Um, Dave Evans, who wrote Designing Your Life, talks about this as a way to find which way you want to go. He says like battle card 3 or 4 scenarios, but it sounds like you knew what you wanted to do. So literally as a hobby at home, like have AI help you build a game plan. Like, what are the first 5 steps going to be? How can I do this with this constraint? And I'm not saying jump tomorrow, but I think the more that you visualize what's possible and think through the difficulties, the steps you would take, the more confidence you're going to have in taking that leap.
Yeah, I know this. I think it's really true, and I always tell young people that it's it's uh, it's not as scary as it looks, and that's the weird thing about it. I remember when I left Goldman, one of the old partners at Goldman, still a very close friend of mine. He's in his 80s now. He says, "You know, you'll figure it out." You know, and and you know this expression, entrepreneurs, they jump off a cliff, they're trying to build an airplane on the way down, but you figure it out. And I think that's something that we need to tell young people that believe in yourself, recognize that you have levels of resourcefulness and energy for the things you're passionate about, way more than the fears. The energy and passion can overcome the fears. Tell us about Bob Dylan, though, sir. I thought that that was to me, when I think of your book, I'm gonna think of so many great ideas and concepts, but it's really the Bob Dylan story that resonates with me the most. Tell us about Bob Dylan.
So this isn't covered in the movie, and it is there is some detail in the Scorsese documentary, but Dylan is and always was going way back to when he got started is a historian. He like and he's insanely studious about music, and so when he got to Minneapolis, he started studying folk music, and I have a high confidence level based on what I've read that he knew more about folk music than anyone else in Minnesota when he left for New York. And the friends they talked to, he would sit in record stores that had these listening booths back then, and he just went over it and over it and over it. And now, obviously he's so successful, you can see this. He did a podcast for a while where he went through different genres of music, and you can just see how much details in his brain. And then he released this book, coffee table book recently about the 50 most impactful songs of all time. And you just see that I think people have a perception that he's just sitting there writing his own songs, but the guy has just studied everyone under the sun. And the second tenet in the book is hone your craft. It's all about continuous learning, and it's a vector that I see run through all the most successful people. Do you go home at night and study the thing you love, and does it feel like an alternative to watching Netflix?
Yeah, so I mean that's the follow-up question. Do you think the curiosity-driven path that he was on, that you wonderfully describe in this book, is harder in the attention economy that rewards, it rewards breadth over depth, as an example?
Potentially, but I would tell you that a lot of people have brought up the threat of AI recently, and I realized I didn't. I wrote this. I started writing this book way before the AI wave, but most of the um, most of the people that are just hyper curious about their field, they act like artisans or craftsmen. And part of what's really cool about an artisan or a craftsman is they're really studying the nuance at the edge of the field. And that's the stuff that's not in the AI model. If you just go to school and learn all the rote stuff and you think you have a defensible, you know, differentiation because of that, that's the stuff that AI can do really great. And the thing that the experts do, or these artisans do, is really study what's on the edge and the nuance that's out there. And they're able to use that confidence in the nuance to really differentiate themselves. So I I'm certain that now Mark Cuban had a great quote the other day. He said there are two types of people in the world: those that use LLMs to learn faster and even more, and those that use LLMs to avoid learning. And I thought it was pretty profound. Like, if you want to be studious about something, there's never been a better time on the planet. Like, these
Yeah.
tools will allow you to learn as fast as you possibly want to go, but you have to have the interest, as you said. If you don't, you don't get there. But this goes back to the test being, are you fascinated with this? Like,
It's a good segue into what you talk about in terms of people wanting success or people just excited about building things, right? It's sort of the same sort of concept. So tell us about your observation as a venture capitalist of founders that you've met. You can tell early on, can't you, when someone's
oh yeah, I
generally
mean,
in love with building, right?
founders have two things that are first of all, they just have a super high motor. They're very determined, at least the best one. They're like hyper determined. They're going to do this come hell or high water. But the second thing is they are hyper curious about what they're doing. And so almost the way that a founder or entrepreneur takes advantage of some new technology wave is they go understand what it's capable of more than anyone else. So just as I'm talking about, maybe Bob Dylan did in folk music, they're doing that with the new AI wave, and they did it with the mobile wave and the internet wave. These are the people that are on that edge, studying that nuance and exploiting it.
Yeah, I mean, see, to me, that's the real love, right? I like building things, and I have intellectual curiosity, and you know, don't get me wrong, I'm in it for success. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm not. Doesn't overly inspire me. What inspires me, and one of the reasons why I do this podcast is that I love talking to authors. I mean, the fact that you took the time to synthesize and put all of these thoughts down for all of us. I used to tease people, Bill. You and I are roughly the same age. I used to say for $10, you can read in 10 hours, 10 years of an author's experience. Now with inflation, it's probably $30 today,
Yeah.
but you get my point. And it's also about the peer group. I always tell my kids, you're the weighted average of the 5 people you hang out with. You write your theme about the power of peer groups and the people you surround yourself with. How much of long-term success is talent? And how much of it is just getting yourself into the right space and into the right peer group to help propel yourself?
Look, I mean, I think having written this book, I would hope one thing people will walk away from is the belief that the techniques that I have in here don't require some excessive amount of intellectual power or some natural talent to go do them. Most of the people in the book are hyper fascinated by their field. They study their butts off, and they collaborate and connect in multiple ways with both mentors and peers. And my favorite principle in the book is this one on peers, because I think a lot of people say what you just said, like being a good friend group, but I don't think they are taught to proactively create a peer group to help them along their career path. And we have some wonderful examples in the book, but I think too many people come out of the college experience sharp-elbowed, mainly because it's so competitive. Like, you're trying to get good grades, you're trying to get the job someone else couldn't get. But what I would tell people is the world's not zero sum. In any field that we're in, there's many, many winners, many, many great winners. And if you can find a group of people that are on the same journey you are, they're on the same rung of the ladder climbing up, and you guys can share and trust one another, it is just so wonderful. You get so much extra horsepower. You get shared learning across the group. You get to share each other's networks. You get a support group on bad days, there's a lot of them. And it's fantastic. And I think this is not, once again, this is a technique that's not taught a lot. I think this is maybe the first book that's really pounding the table on it. But it can be really powerful.
Two other themes, if you don't mind me going to these
No, go for it.
quickly. Sam Hinkie, you give a great example of him. Okay, it's cautionary tale, but it's really about trusting the process. And let's go to McConaughey, who I think is a philosopher king. In addition to being a great looking A-list actor, his depth and his insights, and I love his writing, by the way. And so sounds like you guys are close. And he says something which we have to say to our kids every day, and even to ourselves: don't half-ass anything, right? I guess his dad said that to him. So take those two guys. Tell us a little bit about those two guys and the impact that they've had on you.
Yeah, so I've gotten to meet Matthew here in Austin, where I relocated a few years ago. Um, his book Greenlight is oddly, I think, has a similar objective as my book, but comes from a very different place. He uses the metaphor of a green light to be know when you should put the gas pedal and run at things. And I thought it's funny. I got to meet Rick Rubin through this process, and his book, The Creative Act, is very different than my book, but I think it has the same goal, which is to encourage people to get out there and do their thing. And there's this great anecdote in Matthew's history where he had told his dad he was going to be a lawyer, and he was at the University of Texas pre-law track and met some people at the film school and had a change of heart. He wanted to go do this thing. And he was afraid to tell his father. But when he did, his father said, famously now, don't half-ass it. And he said it was the last thing he expected his father to say and the best thing his father could have said. Because it wasn't only encouragement, but it was responsibility.
Yeah.
He called it rocket fuel. And that's kind of what I hope the book can do. The concluding chapter of the book's titled "It Ain't Easy," and I don't want anyone to think that, you can read this book and everything just comes at you. Everything's hard out there. But one of the reasons you want to be fascinated by what it is you're doing is so that you have the ability to go do all these pieces that bring it all together. And so I think he's a great example of someone who's risen up, but also gives back. That's another principle we have in the book. I think his writing, I think, is intended to help and motivate people. And he's a great role model for a lot of the younger adults out there.
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's just such great messaging. It's a short, Bill, it's a lot of dense information in a short book. I mean, this book took me a few hours to read, and I was like, wow, this is great. And even you've got your book list in the back as well, which I tell people they should look through. And I've read some of these books, and now because of you, I'm going to read more of them. But if I said to you, I get a kid in front of you, and I said, okay, there's one thing that I would like you to do differently tomorrow. Okay, you just finished my book. They come and sit down, they're right there in your office, and you say, okay, there's one thing I'd like you to do differently tomorrow. What is that? What would that hope be for you, for
And for
that
me,
person?
especially if it's a young adult, is just to um, start thinking about and contemplating what it is that they're truly fascinated with. Like that's the lane that if they can get in, I think they're going to have just a wonderfully fulfilling life. And one of the things that motivated me to write the book, Anthony, I'm fortunate enough that people that saw this video online many years ago, some of them shifted careers and have reached out to me, and they're
I love it.
tickled pink. And like knowing that you had this chance to get people into that lane where they're just so happy and so fulfilled. A lot of the podcasters I've met are in that lane. They're thrilled to talk to people and be excited and learn all the time. And so it's doable. And there's a ton of examples in the book. I'm glad that it went fast for you. The way the stories were written were intended to make it like super
No, no, listen,
consumable.
it was very consumable. I think, I think of my 26-year-old son who is he's a creative guy, want to be in the film industry. So, okay, he's in the film industry. He's produced 2 films, and he got the chance yesterday to tour George Lucas's new museum, I guess, of narrative art is what it's called, and
That's
it's in
awesome.
LA. And he said to me it was the greatest day of his life, Bill.
How good is
Greatest day
that?
of his life. Okay.
How good is that?
And I wanna share that with people because he is not following me in my career, nor did I ask him to.
Yeah.
This is something he really wants to do, and I always tell people that Mel Brooks is my spiritual advisor. I've never met Mel, but, Mel Brooks at 99 has said, "Relax, none of us are getting out of here alive," and I think that message in this book is so vivid,
And look, if
running.
if if a kid goes in a museum and it's the best day of their life, that is the right direction. Like,
Right,
because
right.
most young people go in museums and don't have any positive experience
But
whatsoever.
I mean, look, he's walking around in the museum with one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and of course, Anthony, my son Anthony, wants to be a filmmaker, and George Lucas puts his
I
arm
get
around him and
it.
says, "I just want you to know, making films is very hard,
Yes.
okay? But you know what? So is Wall Street, so is venture capital. But if you like it, you can take the body blows that happen
Oh, it's so great.
when you're running down a dream. You're gonna get your ass kicked a few times, and that's the big message of this book, and I gotta tell you, I was inspired by the book, and I'm, grateful, to you for writing it, and thank you for coming on the show. So we're down to the 5 words, okay? So if you ever listen to my podcast, my producer and I come
By
up
the
with
way,
5
Anthony, just
words.
real quick, especially if you're going to have some listeners who are audio only. When you were telling me that story about your son in the museum, and I had a huge smile on my face because that type of fascination
Exactly,
is
yeah,
exactly
exactly.
like
Well, we
now
you
that
know
I've talked to so many young people, that's exactly what you're looking for. When you can
Right,
see that
exactly.
and then blow more wind behind his sails, like that's just so great. So thank you
One
for
one
sharing.
Yeah, well, 100%, but that's why I brought it up because it's elements of that is right here in your book. So, all right, so we have 5 words, Bill. I'm gonna
Okay.
say the word, a little bit of a Rorschach test. You give me a sentence or 2, okay?
All right.
And then we more or less pull these words from your book. So if I say the word regret, you say
Does it have to be a single word? Can
no,
it be
no, it can
a
be a sentence
oh,
or 2. Yeah,
yeah, I
give
just,
me stream of
avoidable.
consciousness,
It's
thoughts that come to
avoidable.
your head.
It's avoidable. Like, start to read my book, first of all, but start to think about how you can do that thing that's weighing on you. I think you can. I think the tools have never been better. Like, the methodology in my book, the AI tools that are out there for learning and connecting have never been. This is the best time in the history of the world to go chase your dreams.
So fascinating because when you say the word regret or I say the word regret, I think inaction leads to regret.
Yeah,
I feel like, I've done some things well and some things not so well, but at least I'm acting.
yeah.
So get there, get in there,
I love
start
that.
acting.
I love
Okay,
that.
I say the word dream, Bill. You say what?
Like possibilities. I go back to this word fascination, which I actually borrowed from Jerry Seinfeld. But like, if you are just hyper fascinated by something, I want anyone out there to contemplate and likely and hopefully believe that they actually can do it in a career. You know,
All
um,
right. I
yeah.
I I love that, and that's the whole reason, the whole synthesis of the book. What about passion? I say the word passion.
There's the word has become a bit of a cliche because people say it so much with a career, and that's why I tried to use the word curiosity or the Seinfeld word fascination. Like the real question is, are you curious about it to a level where you study the history, like want to understand the nuance, study all the greats. Do you naturally want to study the greats like your son does with George Lucas? If you do, I think you're pointed in the right direction. That may not be passion. Like it requires more than that.
Silicon Valley.
Special place, man. Special place. There's a chapter in the book we didn't talk about. It's titled "Go to the Epicenter," and there are a few industries where there is a geographic nexus, and if you get to that place, you will discover that lots of the parts that are highlighted in my book accelerate, and you should be unfearful of that step. If you know you're pointing in the right direction, you should want to get to that place as fast as possible.
So it's interesting because look, I've been out in Silicon Valley a lot, but it's not my place. Wall Street and the financial
Yeah,
center of New York has been more my place. But what I would say about Silicon Valley for me, I'd like Silicon Valley to stay Silicon Valley.
yeah.
We got to get the right policies and we got to get the right, uh, you know, uh, ideas around government so that we don't have everybody leaving Silicon Valley and turning it into Austin. That would be my recommendation. Okay. Last two words, and I'll give you the last word. Okay. Bill Gurley.
Well, I mean that's a hard thing to talk about yourself. I, my, my story is embedded at the back of the book in the epilogue, and my version of my story. And I feel very fortunate to have found my way to my dream job. It took two stops along the way that I think were building blocks. They weren't wasteful. I was an engineer for just over 2 years, and then I worked on Wall Street for 4 years. But I found the way to my place, and so I feel very fortunate to have had that experience. At this point in my life, I'd like to give back. I'd like to be impactful. This book is the first step in that journey, and yeah, that's where I'd leave it.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you and thank you so much for coming on. The title of the book is Running Down a Dream. It's a great cover, by the way. How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love by Bill Gurley. Thank you so much for joining us today on Open Book.
Thanks for having me.